Well, good morning, dear colleagues. Yesterday we have spent impressive hours in different parts of Riga. We had a good start into the conference and a wonderful evening in Rudale Palace, which is a little bit like Potsdam Palace nearby Berlin, so I could feel very at home. Therefore, I would like first to thank our hosts very much for this great experience, for the very warm welcome, and for this important conference. And I mean, it is a conference at the right place in Europe. Let me start into this session with a small provocation. You all know the principle form follows function, associated with modern architecture and industrial design of the 20th century. Related to social and political aspects, I would like to ask our speakers, do we have to change the interpretation of this principle in a cynical way? There are quite a few well-known architects all over Europe who claim that the concept of modernity has died and a sort of retro culture has occupied the urban construction. More and more of these inventions would replace original historic or contemporary architecture. This tendency would poorly mask a demand on luxury, while suburbs develop into utopia ruins. This sort of architecture would serve the exclusion of our society, not the inclusion. Is quality, I would like to ask, an aspect of economic power only? The speakers of this morning's session represent an exquisite quality in science, restoration, architecture, design, and the arts. I would like to ask you, honorable speakers, to add some ideas to these political aspects of the debate. Where do you see the space for quality in the built environment, human and social growth? What is about the relation between professionals and the society? Perhaps we can mention this while reflecting the three approaches of this morning's session. I am proud that I can introduce you to Eugenio Vassallo, full professor of restoration, University of Venice, Italy. He will give us a lesson to the restoration of the Basilica in Vicenza. The Renaissance building is, together with other buildings from the architect Andrea Palladio, UNESCO World Heritage Site. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe has written in its Italian journey, "It is not possible to describe the impression of this basilica from Palladio." Mr. Vassallo, we are looking forward to listen to your explanations, not only to the conservation and modern use of the basilica, but also to the conversion of several surroundings. The second speaker, Jean-Francois Chougnet, is director of the Museum of Europe and the Mediterranean in Marseille, France. This new museum has been inaugurated in 2013, when Marseille has been designed as European Capital of Culture. The museum includes a fort from the 17th century near the old harbor, facing the open sea, a wonderful building. It is the first time that a museum has been exclusively dedicated to the cultures of the Mediterranean. We are waiting to see which active influence this museum has on culture, identity, and attitude to life. Last but not least, Marianne Sætre will introduce us to the international work of SNØHETTA, Architecture and Landscape in Norway. SNØHETTA means snow cap. The architectural office also works international in the field of interior and design. I mean, an office that is able to design the new banknotes of Norway and has been able to win the contest for the Bibliotheca Alexandrina in Egypt, knows a lot about the conditions of our world. You can see we have a great spectrum to discuss during this morning session. Professor Vassallo, please start with your lecture. The floor is yours. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to this meeting. I am honored to be here today. Let's see how the Basilica Palladiana in Vicenza and its surrounding appears today. First of all, I want to stress that Palladio work is limited to the construction of a large loggia surrounding an existing building built by architect Domenico da Venezia between 1449 and 1460. We can see the building in a drawing dating back to 1481, depicting a large hall on the first floor in the shape of an upturned ship's hull, housing the civil court as well as the areas for the workshop on the ground floor. Before Palladio, another architect, Tommaso Formenton, staged the work to encircle the palace with a two-story loggia. However, in 1496, a corner of this loggia collapsed due to the poor structure. Between 1538 and 1542, the most important architects of that time were called in Vicenza to solve this problem: Jacopo Sansovino, Sebastiano Serlio, Michele San Michele, and Giulio Romano. Eventually, in 1546, Gian Giorgio Trissino, a very well-known man in the political and cultural society of Vicenza, convinced the local council to approve Palladio's project, who then was just 30 years old. We see the Palladio Loggia and the plan of Frankfurt box of architecture. After Palladio intervention in 1550, the basilica has not been substantially modified up to now. In the 19th century, various proposals to modify, sometimes significantly, the large hall of the arrangement of the workshop were submitted. However, no one of them was implemented. Meanwhile, Palladio's worldwide reputation was growing, drawing the attention of the public. However, this interest also entailed a certain degree of carefulness. We see the 18th project of transformation. The maintenance works were carried out with utmost attention to be consistent with the original project. We found plenty of documents of this work, which proved extremely helpful during our intervention. Now we see two.
And value map of the
this
older
one?
build.
Oh, queste sono girate, I don't know why. Yes.
Which slide?
No, I don't understand.
Please continue.
The maintenance, intervene. In the 20th century, the growing interest in Palladio's work brought to the implementation of significant restoration intervention of the basilica. The first one on 30 strength of walls supporting the large roof of the hall and focused on the side of Palladio's loggia looking onto Piazza delle Erbe. The works aimed at reducing the visible warping of the walls, a problem that had affected the building for over 50 years. The second major intervention carried out between the end of the 40s and beginning of the 50s concerned the reconstruction of the large roof of the shape of an aperture ship's hull coverting the hall, which had been destroyed by a fire originating from the sparks of the bombardments of Vicenza during the World War II. The third and last intervention is the restoration that we carried in the past 10 years. As for the topic of our meeting here in Riga, it's rather interesting to understand what lies beneath the contemporary intervention carried out on a monument inherited from the past. Innovation meets the past. This concept initially concerned exclusively the relationship between ancient and modern shapes, but then it was extended to the methods. The first intervention of the 30s features two apparently contradictory aspects. On one hand, the use of reinforced concrete was made in strict compliance with the use of modern restoration materials and technique. Therefore, it is in line with the principles of the recommendation proposed in the Athens 1931 Charter of Restoration. And it is not by chance that the designer and the planning supervisor of such works was Ferdinando Forlati, a scholar of Gustavo Giovannoni who inspired the drafting of the Athens Charter. Moreover, the idea of inserting the new structural solution inside the wall walls is particularly brilliant and absolutely cutting edge. Indeed, the reason of this choice was to draw a line between the image and the matter so that it was possible to work on the matter, provided and the image remained unaltered. On the other hand, what is not very much in line with the beliefs and the working methods of this period is the choice to strengthen the frame of the Palladio's loggia along the side looking out onto Piazza delle Erbe, as it was designed in 19th century. Indeed, the wooden structure was replaced with a reinforced concrete one. This was made in spite of the major recommendation of that period, according to which the focus was on the recovery of the original shapes and not on the preservation of the following transformation and stratification. Indeed, I was believed that truth was to be achieved through historical research. More complex and very well defined, the intervention carried out in the period of the World War II from 1948 to rebuild the roof of the large hall, which burned down in a fire originating from the sparks of the serial bombardments of Vicenza. We see the main hall after the collapse of the roof. Now we see the works of the reconstruction of the roof, and we see works of the reconstruction of the roof. The number of documents accompanying the works is definitely much higher than the documents concerning other significant works carried out in the same period. This is probably due to Palladio's fame. It is not by chance then the picture depicting the worker this is probably due to Palladio's fame. It is not by chance then that the picture depicting the worker operating on the wall were all taken from a specific spot, featuring in the background another building designed by Palladio, the Loggia of Capitaniato. A striking example, since the work in progress that we see in the picture was carried out based on the envisaged concept of the each contained in this picture. As for all the other arches, and it is important to stress this aspect, the envisaged concept was completely non-compliant, an intervention that timed and highlighting a technical know-how ended up being a work expressing a huge degree of fantasy, which was remedied by us. The design of the big arch to realize by contract structure and water shelving, and this is the real state of structure in concrete. The reconstruction of the roof of the hall was made using reinforced concrete arches with a wooden cladding. Such a cladding was constructed according to the shapes that we believed to be the original ones. After just 10 years from the previous intervention, the setting remained substantially invariant. The new structure were inserted in the whole walls or completely concealed by the reconstructed parts. And let's now talk about the third restoration intervention that we carried between 2005 and 2013, devoting 2.5 years to the investigation of the design and 5 years to the building site. The investigation campaign we carried out aimed at the understanding the quality of the type of material used, the level of the case suffered over time, the present situation, the previous treatment made on the material and other types of intervention carried out over time, any collapse as well as the disarray of the 19th century following the settlement occurred while building Palladio's Loggia. We see the analysis of the building material and cleaning test. Therefore, we managed to outline a broad and complex framework which spurred us to think about the intervention possibilities according to the materials and the structure. As for the material, we planned and implemented intervention to remove the stack and harmful elements without affecting the substance and the form of the materials. This allowed to bring back to life the color of the decoration where present and to reveal the actual colors of the various types and stones utilized and enhanced by the natural aging process. We see some example. We also managed to protect the accurate maintenance intervention that were carried out from time to time during the long history of the monument, going from the strengthening intervention carried out on the stage placed by Palladio along the loggia as a decoration to the treatments made on the stone materials and plastered surface. The second important chapter of our intervention consisted in installation of various plans, including units and ducts, to make the Basilica Palladiana fully usable, always complying with the rule and regulation in force. The units were installed in unused area under the Corte di Bissari that we see now in the photograph. This left wall area was completely designed by the interpreting and express potential of such meaningful place. The construction of this new structure allowed to build modern and efficient planned units that were implemented with the most sophisticated and cutting-edge technologies without ever affecting the basilica. The paths of the plan ducts were determined according to an accurate and precise research carried out on the material structure of our monuments. We identified all the empty space where they could be installed without affecting either the shape or the structure of the monuments. Not only had we complied with the visible elements, but also with the apparently invisible ones. We can certainly assert that our conservation intention went beyond what you could actually see, thus creating a new way to experience the union between the monument acquired, the ancient, and the contemporary intervention, the new. We see the description of implants. Last but not least, we should consider the topic of the structural strengthening, which was mainly implemented to support the large roof of the hall. The investigation carried out highlighted a very complex situation. Right from the very strict analysis, it was clear that the arches were in very bad condition. And this was really rather alarming, since its unstable situation was not the result of a normal deterioration, but of the way each arch had been constructed. During the design phase, we studied and outlined two different solutions. The first was to strengthen the existing arch by overlapping some metal structure. The second was to replace completely the reinforced concrete arch with plywood arch. We decided to opt for the second solution. The choice was made to comply with both the technical requirements and specifically to enhance the seismic safety and the shape requirements. The strengthening would have significantly changed the geometry and the construction shape, especially inside. On the contrary, the use of plywood allowed to fully recover the existing wooden cladding. To carry out such an intervention, we approached the task in a very conscientious manner at the building site, both in terms of work management, given the limited working space available, and in terms of safety, since we had to operate two large cranes placed one next to the other. The work themselves were extremely hard to carry out too. Then we cut the arch. We noticed the material they were made of crumbled apart. The reassembling phase was difficult to perform too, mainly due to the extreme accuracy of the construction of the joints of the top of the arch. The pictures that we see here only partially show such a degree of complexity. During our intervention, innovation and past were joined together by the methodology we used. The principle of compatibility sweeps away the difference between traditional and modern when we had to select the materials and the technique. We had to put aside the 19th century idea of history as truth, since we realized that research can be never-ending and therefore they do not forcefully lead to a real threat. We left behind the experience provided by the operational standard in favor of contribution provided to each construction phase to bring the monument back to life. We did not make our choice based on ideas, but on knowledge of the actual functioning of the construction itself. The solution proposed to preserve the materials, install the plants, and strengthen the structure are all based on the same principle, preserving the basilica as much as possible by complying not only with formal requirements, but mostly with the construction ones. And these solutions were analyzed according to the result of a true intervention not only formal requirement, but mostly with the construction one. And these solutions were analyzed according on the result of a thorough investigation. Therefore, the choice we made were all based on interpretation model of the material structure of the basilica, capable of joining together shapes and structure, as well as what is visible and what is invisible, a model represented by the table that we see here. Thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you very much, Professor Vassallo, for your detailed explanations. Now I would like to ask Monsieur Chougnet for his lecture and then the third speech, and we can discuss it in the connection of the three speeches, if you go agree with that. It's okay? Okay.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me to explain a little bit about the case study of Marseille on the MUSEM. MUSEM is the acronym for Museum of Civilization of Europe and the Mediterranean. And I think Marseille, this case in Marseille is an interesting case of a combination of four factors. The first one is a new urban planning of the city beginning in the 90s. I will explain a little bit about that. The second one is the restoration of an historical building, which is called the Fort Saint-Jean. And the third is the creation of a new museum with a contemporary architecture made by Rudy Ricciotti. And maybe the fourth is the reason why this new project was created in Marseille in the beginning of the 21st century, was the choice of Marseille of European Capital of Culture 2013. The first factor is the creation in the beginning of the 90s, exactly in 95, of a new economic development project of the center of the city, which we call in Marseille it Euro-Méditerranée. It's the name of this part of the city now, and also the name of the state agency we run the system of recreation of the center of Marseille. Okay, it's a big area because it's 480 hectares, and if you prefer, 1,000 on the 100 acres, which is in the heart of the city of Marseille, between the commercial harbor, we can see it in the picture, the Vieux Port, we have it in the left side, on the TGV station, the new TGV station, which opened in the beginning of 2001. It's another map of the city, probably more clear, with the harbor on your left. On the new part, which is, we call it the J4. Why the J4? Because the old port of Marseille was called Port de la Joliette, donc J is for Joliette, and there was different part of the port, G0, G1, G2, G3, and G4. And the G4 was an interesting part of the city because it was the part in which all the immigrants during all the 20th century come in Marseille, from the immigration of Armenian to Algerian people in the end of the century. So the G4 was closed because the commercial harbor of Marseille was transferred in the 70s. In 40 kilometers far from Marseille is a new harbor, commercial harbor, which is called Fosse in French, and it's the reason why there was a big opportunity to reconstruct the center of Marseille using the part of the commercial harbor, and it's the reason why. And in the beginning of the 90s was decided by the city of Marseille, but also by the French state, French government, because in France, as you know, all what is important is sometimes made by the centralized state. And they created a state agency, which is called also Euro-Méditerranée, to reconstruct this part of the big part of the city, coming from the TGV station, which is in your right, to the commercial harbor with different area. And the idea was to reconstruct it. There was some architect and urban planners, especially Yves Lion, which is a good French architect. We proposed to create at the center of Euro-Méditerranée a cultural part. And it was it's very, very interesting to see that, because Marseille, before this Euro-Mediterranean planning, have basically no center. Marseille is an harbor with a few parts. There is no big square. There is not a big building for the city council. There is no centralized. Not a really centralized conception of the city. And the idea was not to recreate, which would be completely absurd, a new center, but to have a new part with some cultural venues, especially the MUSEM, the Museum of Civilization of Europe and Mediterranean. The MUSEM, I can show you. This is the aerial view, probably more clear than everything, with the old port, the Vieux Port, in this picture. In a photograph, you can see the old port. There is another possibility, the commercial harbor of the Joliette, with all the G1, G2, G3, and G4. And the idea was to create in a series of cultural venues in this new part of the Euro-Mediterranean project. Contemporary art center, which is called in French FRAC. The J1, which is an old venue of the port. The museum, you've seen it on your right, and two other buildings with cultural purpose. The Regard de Provence, which is a museum of local painting, and Villa Méditerranée, which is a building made by Stefano Boeri, consecrated to Congress and the discussion about the Mediterranean. And the museum. What is the museum? The museum was a curious story. It's a little bit long to explain all the details of the story of the museum. At the beginning, it was a national museum of folklore, and we call it in French art et tradition populaire, popular art and tradition, was located in Paris, in the west of the city, in the Bois de Boulogne, which opened in the beginning of the 70s. And was not, very successful. And the decision of the state was to transfer it to Marseille to begin a new course of the museum, using the collection of folklore and tradition, not only French tradition but also European folklore, to transform it to a museum dedicated to the Mediterranean. And the second idea was to use an old building, which is Fort Saint-Jean, which is a former military complex created by Louis XIV in the end of 17th century. It's not made by Vauban, because many people said it's a building of Vauban, because Vauban, when you have a fortress in France, normally they was made by Vauban, but by a student of Vauban, Clerville, and which was never open to the public. Never before the opening of the museum in 2013, because it was a military complex, destroyed partially during the World War II, and after that used by bureaucratical entities of the Ministry of Culture. Donc we recuperate and we open it to the public in 2013 as part of the new museum. This is another view of the Fort Saint-Jean. You can see the Cathedral of Marseille, which was the cathedral of the 19th century, a little bit Byzantine in the spirit too, because Marseille was called in that period Marseille as Porte de l'Orient, enfin part of the Oriental utopia of Marseille in the 19th century. And the concourse was made, the architectural concourse was made in 2004. On the proposal of Yves Lyon, it was not the decision of the architect of the museum, but it was an urban planning with the idea to have a big square combined to the fort. It was an obligation of the competition to have that type of plan, a big square of 72 meters a square of 72 by 72. And the competition was the winner was Rudy Ricciotti, who is an architect you probably know because he has made a new part of the Louvre Museum, which opened 2 years ago for the part of the Islamic dedicated to the Islamic art. He also the constructor of a new stadium in Paris, which is called the Stade Jean Bouin. Ricciotti is an architect living in the south of France, not in Marseille, but in the neighborhood of Marseille, in Bandol. And the idea was to use a special concrete, which was an experimental one, I can see it in these three pictures. Called was a registered trademark now, which goes BFUP, B-F-E-U-P, which is called concrete with big capacity of resistance. With this material, DCCA conceives the part you've seen in the picture, and also the footbridges. You have seen it in this picture. There is 2 footbridges. I will show you better in a few moments. Donc, use this special concrete to create this new museum. Donc, there is finally 2 buildings. One we call it G4 building, which is the new building made by Rudy Ricciotti with Roland Carta as architect of the operation. And this 4 is 15 square meters. And this building contains more than 3,600 square meters of two large exhibition spaces. I will show you a little bit. So the building is this on the first floor. There is a permanent exhibition of dedicated to the Mediterranean. On the second floor, we have 2 large exhibition spaces where we can use separately and combine. This is the plan of the permanent exhibition made in 2013 about the Mediterranean. And we opened it in June 2013 with a big transhumancy, which is the symbol of the Mediterranean culture. The picture is, I think, interesting, and with 2 big temporary exhibitions. The first one called Le Noir et le Bleu, the black and the white, and the blue, dedicated to the invention of the Mediterranean spirit, the tentative of invention of the Mediterranean spirit. This is some picture of the exhibition we have made from the beginning until last week, because the food was closed these doors last Monday. And in the part of the Fort Saint-Jean, of the historical building, is connected to the new G4 with a 100 meters long footbridge. There is a second footbridge, which is we have the connection to the city of Marseille, and with the oldest part of Marseille called Le Panier. Donc, just to show it, this combination of a fortress, which is quite complicated to understand for our audience, because the fortress of Marseille is probably the oldest building of the center of Marseille, but difficult to understand because every part of historical building, we can see it in the picture, was rebuilt several times. The last one is in the 20th century, because we have a large part of the 17th century, but some Greek parts, some Roman parts, some Gothic parts, all combined on the like a sandwich, like a Big Mac, and we have to explain to the public the different levels of story, and it's quite complicated to do. And we created in the top of the fortress a new Mediterranean garden, because Marseille have few gardens, and the Ministry of Culture chose to create a new garden made by a APS agency, which is a French agency of landscaping. And the idea of creating these two parts was to also of course have a restoration of the former historical building, but also to connect it with the new part. You have seen the way Rudy Ricciotti and the other architects choose to not to interfere with the old building, but to connect it with these two footbridges, one coming from the city, the second one inside the museum himself, connected the two parts. The two parts are approximately the same size, curiously, because it's 15,000 square meters in the two parts. What is, I think, interesting in this case of the museum, that it's probably the combination of these different factors, strong urban planning at the beginning, because without this urban planification at the beginning of the 90s, it will be impossible to have the budget to create that type of big museum, and to have the space, of course, because we have in Marseille a lot of space. And the second one is the idea to open finally the historical building of Marseille. Curiously, you have seen it, this Fort Saint-Jean is probably the most visible historical building at Marseille, and was never open to the public. No one can enter in the fortress. We was obviously in 2012 in very bad condition. And the third one is to choose to have contemporary architecture, in some way experimental, with the idea of flexible space for the museum purpose. Now, the question to have the small conclusion. The question is interesting for Marseille, which is a city, as a sociologist of Marseille have said, that have more geographical history than historical history. It's, I think the formula is interesting, because it's the case. Marseille is not well known for its historical monuments. We have, of course, a lot, but it's not very well known. Nobody come in Marseille to see the old part of the city and the monument. The idea was to create a new landmark in the city, using the specificity of the waterfront, create a new waterfront in the city, and combine the history of Marseille and the present of the French culture. Thank you.
Mr. Chougnet, thank you very much for this important example of good practice, which shows a perfect interaction between the past historic buildings and contemporary architecture. And the function for society you have mentioned is to bring into the mind of the people that Marseille also has an important history. Yeah. Now I would like to invite Marianne Sætre to speak to us. As I know, she will give us also some examples for a dialogue between architectures and society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to Riga. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. I choose to stand up talking to you because my lecture is focusing on the dialogue, and our company has an adventurous journey through history in our office, and I would like to share with you a little bit the way we're thinking and the way we are working. And hopefully we will be able to touch some topics for discussion. Our company has got the name from a mountain. And to us, this is actually, it's important to us, to our identity, who we are and how we create architecture. We like to struggle together, and we like to climb the summit of the mountain which we got our name from. And we like to gather, and we like to discuss. So every year we meet in this mountain area of Norway, and we name this event for the conversations, the Dovre conversation, which is this mountain area. And we are architects from all over the world. So they come from New York, we have an office there, and the rest of us are sitting in Oslo, and some in Austria, and now someone in Singapore. So it's a really big and important event for us to come together and discuss. The event of it started with the competition to design the new library of Alexandria in Egypt, an historical monument from the past. This was an international competition in 1989. And these young architects, they were really exploring the world, and they were really surprised when they actually won the first prize. They were younger than 30 years old, these Norwegian architects, and this was only the beginning of an adventurous experience. To us in SNØHETTA, architecture is about the psychology of space. The experience should reflect some dimension of past, present, and future. And in order to experience this balance, you need to relate to the horizon. And only by digging into the past, maybe we could be able to see the future, and this very moment is the present. And this is actually the concept of this project in Alexandria in Egypt. It's trying to grasp a moment in time by digging into the past, creating a new future. It's a really groundbreaking project for the company. It was completed in 2002, and it will contain 8 million media when the collection is completed. The Library of Alexandria continues to produce preservation of history and human knowledge. The building itself gets its inspiration and characteristic from the modern equivalent of information storage. And of course, this has been widely published around the world, and it's a new tourist attraction in Egypt. And it's important to say that this new modern building is relating itself to an historical context. And it's really important that how it creates something that is actually introduced by dialogue to the existing conditions. And by new technology, we were able to introduce the design of old symbols. And this created the facade, the exterior facade in stone surrounding the collection of books. We are a company consisting of both architects, landscape architects, interior architects, and graphical designers. In Oslo, we are about 130 people all together with some architects both in New York and in Oslo. And we are very aware of the importance of sharing knowledge. So this is just to give you an idea of our company, that we are different sister companies and that we are undertaking different projects around the world. And that's why we also are very eager to have this conversation along our goal to create great projects. Yeah, so this is where we are located in Oslo and Lower Manhattan, by the harbor of Oslo. We would like to focus on the importance of sharing space, that this architecture is created as a team. And we have to really focus on to find young talents, and we would like to keep them within our culture in the company. That is important to us. And that's also why we are focusing on the creative process. And this has been a research project named ID Work. What does really happen when you are into a creative process? And I'm just going to introduce to you a few themes from this research project. It's trying to define something which is very hard to define. What's really happening when you have a creative process? And there is published a book, and I'm just going to introduce to you a few drivers. It's focusing on the creative drivers. A driver is something recognized when creative work is happening at its best. And one part that's important for us as architects is to be physical. The way we communicate is actually physical. So these researchers, the psychologists and the anthropologists, they were observing the architects, and they recognized that they're using the hands while communicating. We don't look into each other's eyes, but we look at our hands while we talk about architecture. Idea work is interwoven, it is effective, we work with material, and it can be controversial. In order to be creative, you need to prepare yourself. You need to have a lot of knowledge up front before you go into that space where you start the process of creating. Another important aspect is that you should use techniques how to zoom out, to step back, to look at your project in a larger perspective. This is very important to understand what is really the topic here. What are you trying to achieve? And try to seek the simplifying core. This is just an example. How do we work? We pin up drawings. We step back, we look at the wall, or we get closer to the wall, and we discuss with each other. In this case, we're discussing how to do the design of Times Square in New York. It's the most intensive place on Earth, probably. But it's important to see it in a larger context. How far is it to walk 10 minutes? And what is the relation to bow tie, where Times Square is located? This project was a landscape project, and it wanted to introduce some elements to improve the public space. And we also went to one-to-one mock-up pieces. How will people interact when you start to introduce designed elements in such a space? And this has now been undertaken and fulfilled, parts of this project. It's been a long process with the municipality of New York, but it's interesting to see how the process behind would lead to maybe not so large designed objects, but the way the process behind it's with the dialogue to test it, to zoom out, to go into one-to-one scale. Another perspective which has been important to us is to try to seek some energy in the resistance in projects. How constraints and opposition can inspire your best ideas. Creativity is not only about great and bright ideas, it's about solving problems. So generative resistance is about acknowledging doubt, friction, anomalies, and critique, not as noise to be avoided, but levers to question the given and enhance imagination in everyday work. I'm not going to talk more about this one, but it's something that is important when you want to really work with difficult subjects, that you should enhance and be sort of embrace the problems, maybe, because that's often where you find the good solutions. And an aspect of getting physical is to create models, and also these researchers, they were making some, they checked out different branches, not only architects, but also different professions. How do they communicate when they do their projects? And it was quite interesting. They realized that the geologs in one of the Norwegian oil companies searching for oil in the North Sea, they were also using this technique by getting physical. They make sketches, drawings. They look at the geographical maps. It's going a bit slow, this. Huh? Okay. Using their hands. As architects, we make models and we use our hands, so it's part of this getting physical. To us, it's also important that we should use new tools, and new tools is actually changing the architecture. It gives us new possibilities. Designing the opera in Oslo, we were very much into the physical part of creating this project, but it was about folding cardboard. And now 3D modeling has changed the opportunities. What can be done with this new technology is very important to how we develop our projects. The laser cutter can give us some samples very quickly. We use these machines in our workshop all the time. Sorry, it goes a bit slower. And it's important to us that we want to explore the potential and to create prototypes of new interventions within structure, material, and techniques. Since we are talking about heritage, I just wanted to show you this image from vernacular Norwegian wooden architecture. And I think my point is that in every project there is a context that you need to understand, and the beauty of this project is its meaning from the past. It's a typical situation where there is a house for the boat, and there is always this house next to it to contain the goods. So this image shows something which is meaning in the past, and I think to look at these structures can be a very nice inspiration for us when we are working with projects in the landscape and in nature. So the meaning is, of course, these beautiful pieces, they are falling apart because there is no use for those buildings anymore. And maybe it's important to say that when we are going into the future, we want to explore and get some knowledge from the past, but we are introducing new technology, how to develop. And in that case, we made this pavilion. It's up in very near the mountain named SNØHETTA, where we got our name from. You just saw the first image of this lecture. They asked us to create this pavilion for communication and information about the Norwegian reindeers. So it's like this reindeer pavilion, viewpoints. And the idea is this very simple structure, but inside we have created the space where we use the wooden spatial interior. So this project is really creating a balance between the experience of space and the landscape. It's dedicated to the wild animals during winter. It's not accessible to the people, but it's created there so the human activity with information and lecturing can be within the experience of space. So again, we believe that architecture is very much about the psychology of space, and the relation to nature is very much about what's happening outside of the building. But to create this tension is what we are after. This project is for a Norwegian poet. His name is Petter Dass, and there was a competition to make a project within an historical environment. And of course, to us, it's always a discussion. What is the right approach when you get into this historical context? And referring back to the idea of generative resistance, or trying to imagine something that you haven't seen before, we thought if we just move away from the historical part, it would be an interesting balance between the future and the past. So what we introduced here is actually a cut in nature. Rather than creating a building, being in a context to the old, we go to the landscape and see how can we create architecture within nature with new methods, new technology. And in this case, we created the site by having this slot into the rock, and we replaced the rock with the museum building. And that's where it is. And this creates a totally new dialogue between the past and the future. One of the questions we have been exploring is, how can the concept of monumentality be understood in the broader perspective? We were wondering how monumentality could be related to spatial experience rather than the traditional monument as an object with facades to be observed from surrounding streets. The concept of the opera in Oslo is exploring the potential of combining a building with the public plaza. It started with the urge to create a possibility to get in contact with the waterfront. So we see here, this is just an illustration showing the opera next to the City Hall of Oslo. And we were thinking about, what if the building has the function of the plaza in front of the City Hall? And we just tried to relate these two scales together. And we realized the whole building could fit into this public plaza. And the great thing is that we take the footprint of the building and we give it back to the city and the people of the city. And I think this whole concept is trying to grasp an idea, a dream, and to share it so it's accessible to the people. And the whole thing started with this dream to get in touch with the water, and that's where the whole process of this concept started. To us, it's also very important to have a collaboration with artists. The inclusion of art into our projects from earliest conceptual phases of the design is great importance to SNØHETTA. The development of an artistic expression in conjunction with an artist or artists allow for contextual attitudes and ideas to become integral aspect of the design concept. So in case of the opera, we introduced a collaboration with the Icelandic artist Ólafur Eliasson. And the notion of this space is enhanced by this artist creating this material with lights. So it's really in balance with the architecture, and it's been very important how to develop the project. As well as we've been inspired by the traces of human activity up in the mountains of Norway, collaborating with artists to create patterns on this large roof of the opera to be shared with and experienced with the public. How can the idea become part of an architectural concept? It seemed like a dream, but it also gave us motivation and power to explore the contradiction and eventually fulfill this dream. We believe that the key is to share your dream. Then it can become true. In this case, It's marble from the Carrara in Italy that has been covered the whole 20,000 square meters of roof landscape, which is also an artwork. So it's not only a building, it's a dream, it's a space, it's a plaza, it's an artwork, it's shared, and it's totally out of the architectural program. This is the non-programmed space of the competition. And during the design phase, we were sort of not allowed to increase the cost for the building. So our client were really afraid that we will put too much money into the roof, and that they were really afraid to make it accessible to the people, because then you have all the security issues. But we managed to give it a status as an artwork, and we got extra funding by giving artwork funds to the project. And this is really what made the building possible. And now, integrated art, this is another art project which is integrated. It's made by some artists, how to introduce patterns to these metal sheets. In the interior, it's wooden works, and there is also an artwork of the carpets in the big theater space done by this artist, Pay White. It's Metafoil is the name. It's weaving in textile, but it looks like metal. It's really a great piece of art. So when it comes to the opera, it's quite interesting, this long process of creating this project and the way it has been achieved by the public. And now it is a national protected heritage as the youngest building in the world. So it's quite extraordinary. And I believe the reason why this happened is the people are afraid that it will be destroyed by some modern transformation, the new needs and so on. And I think the people of Norway, they find this belongs to them. It's not about the architect. We are just part of the process, and it's an open process to be shared, and it's generous. And it's more than having one idea, it's more a direction, and something can happen. And in a way, to create an opera building, which is also a public plaza, is very contradictory. It's like trying to put on your hand a glove which is too small. It's very hard and it's very painful, and why do you want to do it? And it's all about belief, and that the result is going to give something back to the people. I wanted to just show you at the end a project in France. It's in Lascaux. I don't know if you know about this place. It's Centre International de l'Art Paritéal. Lascaux is the caves in southern western France. It's very famous for its Paleolithical cave paintings. It's 17,000 years old. It shows images of large animals and fossils. In 1979, these caves came to the UNESCO World Heritage list. And there was a competition some years ago about a new entrance to the caves. So it is a museum project, but it's relating to this context, which is very extraordinary. So mainly this project is about how to enter the cave, and it's also creating a replica of the cave in order to protect the original, because it's not possible for people to enter the original caves because they are so fragile. I was just going to show you this project because for us to introduce a concept, it's about the experience. And this project is trying to enhance the people's experience of entering the cave. And the architecture itself is trying to be more set back into nature. it's a composition with the landscape and the context. It's not about shape or material or expression. It's more about its content. And I think in this manner, it's possible for people to really experience the cave and to do it on their own premises. So that's the idea of this project, that the people would have their own experience inside the space. And with new technology, you can give public information in many different ways. Yeah, this is, it's really exciting to understand more of the background of this project. I will not go into this discussion, but I think in order to keep our time schedule, we can stop here. And I just wanted to say to Jean-Francois that one interesting discussion maybe could be that in Marseille, you have a new building added to the historical context. But what's happening is actually that the balance between these two projects makes a new experience possible. You would never be able to experience that old fortress without this new modern project, creating the possibility for the public to access. And I believe that in order to take care of our cultural heritage, we need to see the role of modern architecture. It is like pas de deux in a dance play. It's the combination of the new and the old that really gives the opportunity to have an experience and to communicate. It's when you have the dialogue that things becomes interesting. Okay, thank you.
Dear colleagues, I'm sure we all know now where to go to for holiday in the next years. So many incredible places we have seen. And I would like to say, Marianne, to share your dream. I love that philosophy a lot. It's great. It's a great philosophy. We have listened to sound examples how architecture and design from the past or from our days could create a new identity through preserving history or through new creative processes. Now I would like to open our discussion, and I'm sure you have many questions, so the floor is open, the discussion is open. Please answer your questions, give us your feedback to this session. Who would like to start with power, fresh? Okay, please.
Freddie, you hear me? Freddie O'Dwyer from Ireland. I'm an architect. It's very interesting just between the papers yesterday and the papers today, and indeed the exhibition around the room in terms of contemporary interventions in historic environments. And in fact, I think all of the panels in the room here are really of old buildings with contemporary modern interventions. But we heard yesterday in the presentation on the Rondalla Palace how the people restoring it were, I think, grappling with the concepts of the Charter of Venice, in particular Article 12, which said that you can't conjecturally restore, and any interventions have to be in a modern style. And I think this really has sort of hamstrung the architecture profession for the last 50 years. I think it's based on a rather doctrinaire document, the Charter of Venice, which in fact isn't original at all. It's actually entirely derivative, going back from documents over the previous 50 years, notably, in fact, the Italian Carta del Restauro of 1936, which is extremely doctrinaire. And I think it's legitimate to use other approaches, I mean, as are used in Europe. I mean, I think there are by my estimation, probably 4 different approaches, one of which is contemporary intervention in old buildings, but others which may well be putting back material in the original style or the original type of materials. If it's recorded, as we saw with the Basilica in Vicenza this morning. But I think the issue, and I think it was raised by Christopher Young yesterday, the question of replica buildings or pastiches, which really has divided Europe. I mean, there have always been buildings reconstructed where buildings have been lost as replicas. I mean, we had the column in the Place Vendôme, pulled down by the Communards, was rebuilt as a replica immediately afterwards. The Campanile in St. Mark's Square in Venice, which fell down in the early 1900s, was replaced by a replica. The Cloth Hall and Cathedral in Ypres were replaced by replicas in the 1920s because the people of Ypres pressed the government, who didn't want to do it, to replace them. In more recent times, we've had the Bridge at Mostar replaced by a replica, with the support of UNESCO, which is the mother organization of ICOMOS, which says that you shouldn't be building replicas. And my modern architect friends, when they go to Berlin, they say, well, they love the Neues Museum because the interventions are modern, but they don't like the proposed reconstruction of the Berliner Schloss, the Royal Palace, because it's going to be 100% replica. Whereas if you go to Dresden and look at the buildings which have been rebuilt, like the Frauenkirche, which is 95% replica, surrounded by 100% replicas, you know, it's seems to be acceptable because it's the reconstruction of something that's been lost. So are people entitled to see something that's lost? Or should it all be different?
Also, is it possible that you concentrate on a question?
I'm just wondering, really, does the panel think that interventions should be always in a contemporary style? Are there other options for using more traditional methods?
Okay, thanks a lot. Who would like to give an answer to this? No, okay. Another question in the auditorium? No question at all. So we are near to 11. And, yes, please.
I could try to say a few comments to your question, but I'm not sure I really got the point. But it's about modern intervention when it comes to dilemmas within restoration. And I think the Palladio example is very, very exciting. And it's similar to what we see in Marseille. In order to give the opportunity of experiencing the past, exploring the past, we need modern interventions. Otherwise, we're playing an impossible game because of some kind of rules. It's much higher value if we are able to use modern technology and see new construction methods in order to recreate the spatial experience, which is what architecture is about. It's not about the material and the styles, it's about its context, its creation and its meaning. So it's all these things combined, and I think it would be a failure if we fall into the discussion of rules. I think every project has to discover and to be tailored in order to give the correct answer. No project is similar. You can learn from one another, but in each case, you need to do a research and you need to tailor-make your problems in order to create something which is really finding the balance. It's a very difficult exercise, but you need to find the balance.
Thank you very much. Okay, another question, please.
It was brilliant, but I think you have a secret weapon, because you are talented, your company is great, but how do you get this client in the time of cost cutting? How can you solve this problem? I think you work a lot, you have excellent solutions, but it means really much extra cost, I guess. So how can you manage it to solve this problem?
Okay, I can try to answer this question. We are struggling like anyone else with costs. It's constantly an issue when you are into a construction project. It's a tough balance. But we think that it's very much about belief. If you want to really create something which is not seen before, you want to find the right balance, you want to create a generous concept to be shared, you need to share your thoughts and you need to believe in the value of what you're creating. And it has to do with opening up the process towards the public, towards the clients and to the decision makers. And in terms of the opera, it really was a great experience because I think at the beginning it's a lot of luck involved because you win a competition among 700 entries and there is a jury that recognizes this as a winning project. But then there is a big fight in the political landscape. They have to decide that they're going to actually do this, they have to give the money and so on. And the timing for us was fantastic in that case of the opera in Oslo. I don't know if it would happen again. It was really an extraordinary situation for us. But we have other experiences around the world, and I know that a lot of our projects, to us, it's not really a good business. We are losing money on a lot of our projects, especially those in France. Cost cutting all the time and very hard contracts, and we have to fight to get our solutions to be carried out. That's the life of an architect. To us, it's not about money, it's about belief, and it's about opening up the process and dialogue, and to share to share the vision. The vision has to be in other places than within the architect. It has to be in society. And I would like to address the fact that we see that in a lot of projects, at least in Norway, there is maybe a fatigue in the people working with cultural heritage because they are very oriented towards protection. And rather than opening up for dialogue and discussion to see new possibilities, it's a fight. And the heritage authorities, they lose this fight all the time, and it's a really sad story. And we're losing our cultural heritage because no one is able to win this fight. I don't know if this was maybe backdrop of your question. Yeah.
Yes. I'm sure that your question and the answer shows us the way what we should do in the following years. This conference is therefore so important, to strengthen the dialogue between the different professionals, the dialogue between the professionals and the society, and last but not least, also the dialogue between society, professionals, and investors and politicians. Therefore, we are so lucky that we have this conference in Riga with these complex issues, to strengthen, as I have said, to strengthen this dialogue. It's necessary. Otherwise, we always have the problem with less investment, less money, and why should we invest in quality of life? That's the question in the center of that. Okay, I would like to thank all the three speakers very, very much for this impressive lessons this morning. And I think we have to discuss, besides a coffee break, a lot of things that we have heard today, and we will see us after the coffee break, I think, here in this room again. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.